Now, another question that we often get asked is about SARS-CoV-2, where that falls. It does fall under Rule 1. It's actually under the third indent, and it is now included in the guidance document as a specific example. So it's perfectly clear where it falls, and is actually listed as one of the examples. So this is going to be a Class D device. So let's move on and look at another rule. Now, Rule 3 has multiple bullet points, and I'm now looking at Rule 3H, and this particular rule looks at cancer. So it's devices intended to be used for screening, diagnosis, or staging of cancer. So first of all, it describes what cancer is. It doesn't say tumours, because we do have benign tumours. It describes what cancer means. But it also says that this rule covers both cancerous and also precancerous conditions, where the devices are intended to be used for screening, diagnosis, or staging of cancer. It also talks about the purpose of the disease staging to provide information with respect to patient management, the appropriateness and accuracy of treatment decisions, and/or prognosis or prediction. And remember, prognosis and prediction are part of the definition you need to consider for intended purpose. So in the same way with Rule 1, it also continues and has some examples. There's quite a lot of examples with this particular rule. The first example here is for fecal occult blood. And the very early discussions of the IVD classification group, there's quite a lot of discussion on this particular point, because fecal occult blood is a very simple test. It's looking for blood in feces. But is it a cancer test, or is it a bowel screening test that could be just looking to see whether you have piles or something much, much simpler and less malign? So if you intend it to be used for screening of colon cancer, and that's what you write in your intended purpose, it's a Class C device under Rule 3H. If, on the other hand, you intend it to be a bowel screen, which doesn't talk about cancer, then that's going to be classified in its own right, and is going to be a Class B device. So again, it's really, really important to actually not only understand the rule, understand the intention behind it, have a clear intended purpose, and look carefully at these examples, because they're non-exhaustive, but it's not always as straightforward as it looks. Now, I used life-threatening as an example earlier on, and so if we look at Rule 3K, this says that devices intended for the management of patients suffering from a life-threatening disease or condition are in Rule C. So the rationale behind this is that the device provides important critical or sole determinant of the correct patient management decision, and provides information for the purpose of patient management, such as treatments and interventions as required. So again, it helps clarify that that's what's intended. You could say that a lot of things ultimately could lead to being a life-threatening condition, but is it the critical or sole determinant? And so it gives you some examples here. So things like D-dimer for thrombotic diseases. It doesn't just include blood glucose, but it also actually includes HbA1c as well, and also various monitoring tests for anticoagulant therapy. So again, you have to look very carefully at the examples and what the intention behind each of these rules is. So let's move on. I'm going to jump forward now to Rule 5, which I'm going to actually look at 5B, which talks about instruments. So it generally says that instruments that are IVDs are going to be Class A. However, it talks about the fact that certain facets of that instrument will be looked at when the reagents are looked at. So, for example, when a notified body looks at an HIV assay, Carryover is important, and carryover is a feature of both really the instrument combined with the reagents. But as part of the review of the technical file, they will look at the carryover study that has been done. Now, not all instruments have a reagent. So what happens in this case? So if the instrument has an independent measuring function, which does not use any additional reagent, it's classified according to the intended purpose of the analysis, including instrument controls or instrument quality controls. And the examples it gives here is cell counting analyzers used in hematology, unselective electrodes, instruments measuring blood gas or glucose via its sensors, and specific gravity in urine analysis, and finally mass spec for bacterial identification. So if we took blood gas as an example, if it was being used in a theatre, for example, or an ICU, then that is being used in a life-threatening situation, and so therefore it's going to fall under Rule 3, and it's going to be a Class C device. It's not going to be a Class A device. So again, if you have just had overviews of the IVD classification, you may have got the impression that all instruments are Class A. Well, they are unless there's a reagent, or if they're sold as a system, so you always sell the instrument with the reagents, then that would be classed in a slightly different way. So let's look at the last section I have here, which is a combination. So let's look at that combination where we have an analyzer and it's got some software on it. We've got reagents, calibrators, controls, and also a wash buffer. So you have to look at each independently. They're not sold as a system, so you always sell an analyzer with every kit. So the analyzer is looked at in its on its own, so it's a Class A device. And you look at the reagents. Now the reagents, depending on what they're measuring, could be A, B, C, or D. And then the cals and controls are always looked at with the reagent and what that does. So if the reagent's a B, then the cals and controls will be a B, and vice versa. However, if the controls are without a quantitative or a qualitative assigned value, they're always going to be a Class B, and that's according to Rule 7. And then finally, we have our wash buffer, and our wash buffer is an accessory, and that is going to fall under Rule 5A and is going to be a Class A device. So that's also where sometimes there can be surprises in both directions. If you had a wash buffer that was used with an HIV assay, you may think that automatically it falls into Class D, but if it's sold on its own, then it may just be a Class A device. So you have to look at all the different elements that you sell, how you sell them, and then you have to classify them each independently. So it's important to understand that concept, because sometimes it means that you've actually got more devices than you originally thought you had to classify. So I hope that gives you a flavour for what you're going to find in this guidance document. And I hope it encourages you to go and actually look at it and read it in more detail with perhaps a fresh set of eyes. I've been in the IVD notified body world for over 20 years. And every time somebody comes to me with a classification question, I always pull this out and I always reread it. It's actually quite easy to get things wrong, and you do need to consider and look at all the rules. So as I say, I would highly recommend that when you're classifying a device, you literally have a table, you walk through and you look at each individual rule and write down why you think it applies or it doesn't apply. It's the best way to be safe. And not only that, but also be able to prove to a regulator that you did do due diligence. So thank you for listening in to this Frequently Asked Friday, and I hope this encourages you to continue and listen to further vlogs. Thank you very much.